The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What happens when a smug late-night host locks horns with a governor who still looks like he's fumbling through a parking lot searching for his car keys? You get Greg Gutfeld ripping Tim Walz to pieces, shredding him like a flimsy cardboard cutout tossed into the middle of a raging hurricane of sarcasm. From disastrous policies to cringe-worthy political theater, Gutfeld spins Minnesota's so-called leadership into a comedy act that feels less like a debate and more like a televised demolition derby gone off the rails. Don't dare blink, because this takedown burns hotter than Walz's frozen approval numbers. And every line lands harder than the last brutal hit, leaving behind nothing but smoking rubble and the echo of laughter.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Oh, Tim Walz. If political leadership were served at a buffet, he'd be the lukewarm mashed potatoes no one ever asked for, but somehow still ended up scooped onto the plate with zero enthusiasm. Tasteless, bland, and impossible to avoid, he just sits there while everyone wonders who thought it was a good idea to bring him to the table. Then storms in Greg Gutfeld, swinging sarcasm like a chainsaw let loose in a fireworks warehouse, slicing through Walz's endless blunders with the speed and force of a comedian running on overdrive. This isn't real leadership, it's bargain bin performance art. And not the genius kind, but more like sloppy finger painting done with spoiled mayonnaise, messy beyond belief, cringe-inducing, and unforgettable for all the wrong reasons.
He exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service, and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over it. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is a guy who pushes a hoax about a sex on a couch, and then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cuck.
If you're enjoying this demolition, hit that subscribe button right now, because things are only going to get wilder from here. Let's be honest, Tim Walz running Minnesota is like watching a substitute teacher desperately trying to control a classroom full of caffeinated raccoons bouncing across the ceiling tiles. He talks like a man who skimmed Leadership for Dummies in an airport gift shop and then decided that flimsy booklet would be his lifelong political strategy. And the execution? Oh, it's flawless. If the actual mission was to turn the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 disasters, then Walz deserves a gold medal in failure. Every single decision feels less like leadership and more like a front-row crash course in pure, unfiltered chaos, leaving Minnesotans wondering when the circus will finally end.
I saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to break a sweat. Roasting Tim Walz is like dunking on a guy who wanders into a job interview wearing Crocs, blindfolded, and carrying his resume scribbled on a napkin. It's as if Walz strolled onto the debate stage armed with nothing but a plastic kazoo and a whiteboard scrawled with the word feelings in crooked letters. He practically begged for it, serving Gutfeld a roast platter labeled extra crispy and leaning in like he wanted to say, "Go ahead, finish me off." By this point, it's not even satire anymore. It's full-scale sarcasm warfare played out on national television. Walz arrived looking like a clueless kid at arts and crafts night, clutching glitter glue and a bent participation ribbon, hopelessly out of his depth and ripe for total destruction.
Walz is a strange dude.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange. Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
Strange.
You know, he called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, "My house is being surrounded by people with American flags." I said, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He said, "I think they're going to attack me." This was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. You know, they like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, "How do you know?" There were about 15,000, he said, "Could you put out a word like that I'm your friend?" I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets, before truth, tweets, long ago, I put out a statement, "He's a good man, the governor. He's on our side." I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
Let's talk about the economy. Tim Walz looked straight at inflation, rising unemployment, and businesses fleeing Minnesota in droves, and somehow decided the solution was more taxes. Tax the air, tax the smiles, maybe even tax the very thought of packing up and moving to South Dakota. Nothing seemed too absurd for him. Companies are running from the state like it's a haunted mansion built on climate mandates and endless social justice PowerPoints that nobody asked for. Then Gutfeld ripped into Walz's economic disasters like a raccoon tearing through a compost bin at midnight, pulling out every rotten policy one by one. He practically shouted, "How do you make California look like a capitalist paradise by comparison?" Under Walz, the only things growing are stacks of red tape, piles of government paperwork, and the pounding migraines of hard-working families crushed under the weight. And when it comes to crime, Walz treats public safety like a toddler playing with matches, optimistic, clueless, and always ending in flashing lights and sirens. His grand plan? Blame society, hold hands, and hope criminals are moved to tears by interpretive dance, like handing out scented candles in the middle of a 5-alarm fire.
Went on the same bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak, Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the 5. He's a clown without a circus. He
doesn't even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for? Yeah. I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld is turning crime stats into pure comedy gold, practically waving around a Minnesota map with the words, "Here be carjackings," stamped right over the Twin Cities. He compared Walz's crime plan to a mall cop trying to stop a riot armed with nothing but a kazoo, a clipboard, and a smile. Hopeless, laughable, and downright dangerous. If Walz were in charge of national security, the whole country would probably be brushing up on Russian by next week. And then comes education, a sparkling dumpster fire if there ever was one. Walz, once a teacher himself, somehow decided classrooms should be transformed into playgrounds for woke word salad instead of places of real learning. Forget math and science. Kids now get graded on spotting microaggressions and building safe spaces out of popsicle sticks and construction paper. Gutfeld didn't just mock it, he torched it with precision. He joked that the only subject students are excelling in is the art of being offended. Under Walz, schools don't look like schools anymore. They look like bad theater productions. Detention is gone, discipline vanished, and in its place are participation trophies and TikTok therapy sessions, while academics are quietly shoved out the back door and forgotten.
I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the difference?
And let's not forget the COVID catastrophe. Tim Walz acted like the pandemic was his big audition for America's next top authoritarian. He slammed the doors shut on everything, dragging bar owners into court, fining churches into the ground, and strangling small businesses. But protests? Oh, those were suddenly essential. Apparently the virus came with a political filter? Who could have guessed? Gutfeld feasted on that hypocrisy, ripping into how Walz canceled Grandma's bingo night while rolling out the red carpet for mass demonstrations, as long as someone was chanting Marxist slogans with a papier-mâché puppet in hand. That wasn't public health, it was political theater dressed up with a clipboard and a smug grin. And then came the budget surplus. Minnesota had a mountain of extra cash so enormous, even Walz couldn't pretend it wasn't there. But instead of returning it to the taxpayers, the very people who earned it, he splurged like a reckless gambler at a government yard sale. More bureaucracy, more consultants, more useless programs, maybe even a taxpayer-funded mural of himself, gazing heroically into the distance like a wannabe statesman.
Says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
Gutfeld nearly toppled over from laughing at the sheer absurdity. He joked that Walz, blowing through a massive surplus, was like handing a toddler a platinum credit card and telling him to only buy the essentials. Sure, Tim, because obviously the Department of Overregulation desperately needed a brand new espresso machine, a fleet of ergonomic chairs, and maybe a taxpayer-funded yoga retreat in the name of equity. Walz has turned red tape into a competitive sport, practically Olympic-level bureaucracy. In Minnesota today, you can't even run a lemonade stand without filling out 14 permits, going through a background check, and signing off on a pronoun declaration form. It's Soviet-style governing, wrapped in shiny buzzwords and slick branding, and somehow managing to deliver even worse results than expected. Gutfeld nailed it perfectly. Walz, twisting, stumbling, and fumbling through policies like he's auditioning for bureaucratic gymnastics, every move more ridiculous than the last routine. And then comes his awkward obsession with Gavin Newsom. Walz clings to California's governor like a starstruck fanboy, determined to transform Minneapolis into San Francisco's colder, clumsier cousin, and failing spectacularly at every step.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's adult like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back. This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
He watches Gavin Newsom torch California like a scented candle made entirely of bad policy, and somehow thinks, perfect, let's add frostbite and strip away even more jobs. It's the same West Coast disaster script, only performed in snow boots with higher taxes and fewer opportunities for families trying to survive. Gutfeld didn't hold back. He went straight for the jugular, saying, if Gavin Newsom is a shampoo commercial with the ego of a Bond villain, then Tim Walz is the clueless understudy who stumbled in halfway through and started improvising in pig Latin. Walz struts around like the confused offspring of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning traffic light, pretending he's a progressive savior while tripping over every agency he touches and leaving chaos in his wake. And don't even start on transportation. Walz pitched a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might finally arrive around the same time dinosaurs return from extinction. Meanwhile, Minnesota's roads look like a post-apocalyptic Mario Kart track, with drivers praying their cars survive another pothole-ridden commute. But Walz, he's too busy selling fantasy trains like he's auditioning for Hogwarts, while the real infrastructure crumbles to dust like stale, gluten-free toast.
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath? You don't want to see.
Gutfeld rolled his eyes so hard they practically needed their own Richter scale reading. The sarcasm was so thick it could have been bottled and sold by the gallon. Brilliant plan, Tim. Toss common sense into the shredder and pour billions into Elon Musk fan fiction on rails. Because nothing screams fiscal genius like a bullet train to nowhere, moving slower than a DMV line, and about as useful as a solar-powered flashlight in January. And then there were Walz's media appearances, an absolute spectacle in their own right. Picture a man cosplaying as a capable leader, speaking with all the clarity of a dial-up modem trapped underwater, looping in endless circles like a GPS forever stuck on recalculating. Behind the cameras, his advisors might as well be waving giant flashcards and firing off flares, praying he can finish a single coherent sentence. Gutfeld shredded it all with surgical precision. Watching Walz explain policy is like watching a raccoon try to tap out Morse code while wearing oven mitts. Chaotic, confusing, and somehow still convinced he nailed it. This isn't leadership. It's verbal gymnastics nobody ever wanted to see.
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
And when the pressure builds, Tim Walz doesn't just pivot. He pirouettes like a ballerina overdosed on 5 Red Bulls and a lifetime subscription to The Atlantic. Ask him about crime tearing through Minnesota, and suddenly he's rambling about how bike lanes will somehow reduce violent felonies. Bring up the collapsing economy, and he launches into a sermon about gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional strain of asphalt management. This isn't governing, it's interpretive policy theater, complete with TED Talks on feelings and PowerPoints about healing communities through ukulele circles. Gutfeld nailed it perfectly, calling Walz a human magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him up, and the answer is always some muddled jargon about intersectional frameworks or equity gardening. And then there's the branding. Walz struts around like a farm dad everyman, but his version of roughing it is sipping almond milk without a paper straw. He's the guy who shows up to a football tailgate carrying kombucha and asking if the brisket is locally sourced. Gutfeld's punchline hit like a hammer. Walz is about as folksy as tofu at a monster truck rally, quoting Noam Chomsky in a fleece vest while pretending he's just one of the people.
Video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her close and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh, yeah, weird. I've seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad.
Minnesota's rural towns are crying out like someone stuck on hold trying to cancel dial-up internet in the year 2025. They wanted a leader who understood real life, tractors, long workdays, and maybe a church potluck or two. But instead, they got Tim Walz, a man who seems to think Greater Minnesota begins at the edge of a bike lane and ends wherever the kombucha taps run dry. This isn't leadership. It's lifestyle branding with buzzwords piled on top, governing like he's live-streaming a TED Talk called Empathy Through Bureaucracy. Gutfeld's knockout punch sealed it perfectly. He crowned Walz the IKEA governor. He comes in a box, half the screws missing, assembly required, and by the end, you're left crying over a wobbly disaster, wondering if you built a metaphor instead of a leader. And he was dead on. Walz treats policy like a Pinterest board, convinced that hashtags, oat milk, and interpretive dance can replace actual governance. Gutfeld tore through every bloated bill, every word salad speech, every sanctimonious lecture masquerading as vision, and exposed Walz's oatmeal-flavored politics for what they are, soggy, bland, and painfully mediocre. And the worst part? Walz probably walked away thinking the whole demolition was a standing ovation. Minnesota deserves far more than a glorified group project in khakis, and Gutfeld, with punchlines sharp enough to slice steel, reminded the nation that behind the fleece vest and passive-aggressive grin is a governor fumbling through expired IKEA instructions, confused, underwhelming, and missing half the screws.